Welcome to the Rhinestone Podcast, where we journey through the extraordinary lives of music's brightest stars. I'm your host, Banner Driscoll, and today we're stepping into the groove-heavy, genre-bending world of Oz Noy, a guitarist whose playing doesn't follow rules. Born in Israel and raised on a steady diet of rock, blues, funk, and jazz, Oz Noy was already turning heads in Tel Aviv's top studios and clubs by his teens, but it was his move to New York City in the late 90s that truly set things in motion. Dropped into the city's pulse where musical boundaries blur and expectations bend, Oz carved out a reputation not just as a player, but as a force. His sound is instantly recognizable, a blend of greasy funk, dizzying jazz lines, and rock guitar tones that wobble, twist, and snarl. Whether it's a blistering solo or a laid-back pocket groove, his playing walks a tightrope between precision and chaos, with groove always at the center. He's worked with a staggering range of artists, from the Broadway power of Idina Menzel to the soulful pop of Gavin DeGraw, and in the instrumental world, he's assembled all-star casts of collaborators: Vinnie Colaiuta, Dave Weckl, John Medeski, Keith Carlock, and Will Lee, to name a few, on a string of albums that have become cult favorites among musicians and fans alike. Records like Ha and Schizophrenic showed just how far Oz was willing to stretch. Twisted Blues Volume 1 and 2 fused Texas grit with New York swagger. Who Gives a Funk and Booga Looga delivered horn-heavy grooves that channeled James Brown and Jeff Beck. And with his latest jazz outing, Fun One, Oz leans deeper into swing and improvisation, all while keeping his signature attitude intact. Today we dive into the world of Oz Noy, his journey from Israeli prodigy to New York innovator, the genre-defining spirit behind his sound, and the mind of a guitarist who makes complexity feel like pure, infectious fun. Oz, welcome to the Rhinestone Podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words.
You're welcome. We always try to make our guests feel welcome whenever they come on this podcast. So, well, Oz, you have such an amazing career, and it was so much fun going through and exploring your work. I've been a big fan of yours. I found you through a guitar player feature. Oh, man, probably at least 20-ish years ago. It was probably about then. And I've been a big fan of yours ever since. I bought Schizophrenic. I've loved your playing. And so this is really an honor for me to be able to talk to you. So thank you so much for coming on. So there is somewhere I want to go with you. And what I want to talk to you about particularly is about a venue. And a lot of times I don't start with venues. I tend to start with people or things like that. But you have a certain connection to this venue, and I would love to explore your connection with it. And that venue is the Bitter End in New York City. What can you tell me about the Bitter End?
Well, before I moved to New York, let's say maybe a year before I moved to New York, I had a bunch of good friends of mine, Israeli musicians that were already living in New York. And they were playing in different clubs, doing different type of music. So there was a bunch of guys that were playing a lot of jazz. So they were like playing a lot at Smalls, the jazz club. And then there was a few friends of mine that were doing more like funk and rock stuff. And they were playing every Sunday at a club named the Bitter End. So they told me, when you move to New York, come to the Bitter End. Every Sunday night there's a jam. But it was kind of like a funk R&B jam. It wasn't a jazz jam. Because at Smalls, it was where the jam scene was. All the guys, like Brett Meldau, Bill Stewart, Brian Blade, everybody was, that was the home, Kurt Rosenwinkel. Bitter End was more like a funk club, actually a singer-songwriter club. So what happened when I moved to New York, those friends of mine told me, hey, come to the jam. So I came to the jam, and there was a guy there that was running the jam named Dave Mann. And he was a kind of a soulful, bluesy, funk, R&B guitar player, singer. And he would host this Sunday jam. So he heard me play a couple of times. I sat in with the band, and he asked me to come and play with the house band sometimes. Now, at around the exact same time that I moved to New York, Keith Carlock moved to New York, and we both kind of went to those jams, and that's kind of where we met and started to play together. So what happened is I started to sometime do those Sunday night jams and in a house band, and sometimes I would go and just jam if I wasn't on the gig. And then I somehow thought that if I'll put together a little band and play something and perform, I'll get noticed and people will hear me play and call me for gigs. So I gathered like a few friends of mine from there that I knew, and I started to do this trio that actually started in Israel. And I because I was playing at that gym, one of the owners of the club kind of knew me, and he gave me like a gig, like once a month to play there. And that's how my whole thing started at the bitter end. So basically, the beginning, maybe the first year, maybe the first 2 years or something in New York, I would play there once a month. Actually, I would say, yeah, maybe 3 years. I would play there once a month in New York. And the owner was this guy named Kenny Gorka, and he's a kind of a legendary figure in the New York music scene. Like he led a lot of the cool thing about the Bitter End is it's not a club that goes like, oh, if you don't bring people, you're out. You know, if he saw a talent or somebody that he liked, he will let them play even though with nobody there, you know? So he led a lot of like famous like Lady Gaga, Gavin DeGraw, many Vanessa Carlton, many people became like pop figure to play at the club, although they were not famous. So I wasn't a pop guy. I was a completely different. He hardly ever did instrumental music, but somehow I don't know why he kind of liked me, so he let me play there. And at the beginning, it was once a month instrumentally, and it just kind of started to roll into this thing. And after a couple of years of doing that, I asked him if I can record a live album there, and that was basically the first album that I released was Oz Live. And after that, I started to play there every Monday for 17 years straight.
Wow.
Almost 18 years, actually. I stopped right before the pandemic to do that Monday, that steady Monday. And so that's the story, you know, and basically what that club for me as opposed a lot of people that play at that club were singer songwriters, so it was like a famous singer songwriter room. It's actually a legendary place. Like Dylan played there, Joni Mitchell. They have that famous Donny Hathaway live that's recorded there, and then even Weather Report played there. You know, it was a pretty kind of wild place. So I started to play there regularly, and I was kind of the only, maybe one of the only instrumental acts there every Monday. After me, there was a jam session. But the thing is, I was able to write music, call the musician that I want to play with, and play and kind of develop my music in that room. I still do it now. I don't do regular Mondays, but I still play there like maybe like twice a month or something.
What's the importance of having a consistent gig like that as a musician? So I'm in Atlanta, and obviously Atlanta is not as proficient as New York, but there are people who have these consistent gigs where it's like they run a jam or something like that on a Monday or Tuesday, usually when everyone else is not gigging, right? And one of the things I see about those players that go to those jams is they very quickly become monster players because they just have a consistent gig like every week. And so for you and your experience, what is the importance of having that consistent gig every Monday for, 17 years?
I think I would not have a solo career if I wouldn't have that gig, because I can't really. There's different ways now. The world has changed, but I can't really see a way to develop original music and your voice unless you're playing live, and be able to do it once a week. It's so consistent that it really lets you, you know. For me, it's like a lab. I would just try stuff, but I would also perform for people and play with musicians that I like, that hopefully will kick my ass. You know what I mean? I don't see how I would be able to make any records if I didn't have that gig. Like literally, I probably wouldn't have a solo career.
So the thing I think about this is kind of a parallel, and one of the things that's kind of become a theme on this podcast is the importance of that consistent gig. And while it hasn't necessarily been something exactly like this, one of the other parallels that a lot of musicians that have been on this podcast have brought up has been playing in church every Sunday. So it's just like a similar gig. Now, one of the differences between what I believe you're doing at the bitter end versus like a church gig is that you're the leader of it, right? And you're kind of developing more music, whereas, a church gig is, how great is our God for, however long, whatever, right? My question is, how, as a leader of a gig like that, how do you keep it fun and interesting? And how do you make it a a fun place for musicians to hang out? And also, how do you make it interesting so that the audience comes back and enjoys it and has a good hang?
Okay, well, the audience thing is a separate thing that we can discuss. I'll answer the first part. The part with making it interesting is I only think about what music I'm gonna play and what musicians I'm gonna use when I do those gigs. So to me, every week is like some kind of an experiment or developed of something, you know. And I wrote a lot of original music during that time. So to me, it's almost like I had this agenda, you know, okay, I'm making a new record next year. I have to write 10 tunes. So I was working on writing the tunes and bringing them to the bandstand at the bitter end and bringing them to the band to play. So to me, every week was like um, some kind of like inspired experience of some sort. You know what I mean? I don't think I've ever done a gig when I was like, oh, let me just do this and go home. It was never. It's always that you're always trying to work on your tone, on your on your expression, on the music that you play. Of course, there were gigs that I played the same music for like a bunch of times, but you know that's still okay. Um, and hopefully it came across to the other musicians because people played with me there and still are. You know what I mean? So people are interested in playing and making music, and
And
that
not
room.
just and not just like musicians, but like world caliber players are playing with you there.
Yeah, but those are the guys that I've been I'm lucky enough to play with those guys all the time. So, and I have, you know, the thing is, I live in New York and I have access to those guys in New York. When I tour, a lot of times I'll tour with guys that are not from New York. But even those guys, sometimes they come to New York and we play there, or you know. So it's like the it could have been any room that will give you the opportunity. It's just that I got really lucky where the bitter end is a really good room to play because it's not big, but it's also not small. So I can bring a Marshall and crank it and play there. It's rare. Most places you play in a hall or you play in a small club. You have to bring a little deluxe or something. You know, that was a room. It still is that I can bring a Turok, I can bring a Marshall, I can bring two amps playing stereo. I can fuck around, do whatever I want, and try stuff, which I still do till this day. So it's kind of a rare situation. I want to mention one other thing. The only other place that was kind of equivalent to that, it was smaller, but it had that same kind of vibe and idea, was the 55 bar that actually ended up closing. And the 55 bar was where Mike Stern used to play twice a week when he was in town, where Wayne Krantz used to play every Thursday. Um, there was a couple other people that had steady gigs there. So there was kind of the equivalent of the bitter end. The only difference it was that the 55 was much smaller. You can still dig in and play, but it was a smaller room and it held like half of the people at the bitter end. Um, yeah, so that's like I don't know, I just got lucky with that. You know what I mean? And people. So here's the thing about people showing up. Things have really changed drastically. Um, I would say since maybe YouTube started to become big. Like I can't say the exact year when it started, but you kind of notice before the pandemic, a few years before the pandemic, that there's like less and less. Like if people will show up if something is special, you know, but there was a lot less attendance, and it was a lot harder to bring people to gigs. Where when I started to play in New York, I'm talking about when I started to do my steady Monday night in New York. It started in 2001 and it ended sometime in 2019. Maybe it started 2002. 2002 it started, sorry. Um, we used to play on a Monday night, which is normally a completely dead night, at least today. We used to play on a Monday night at 10:30, which was never 10:30. It was always later. And we had many, many, many nights where it was packed with people. People were hanging late. It was a whole scene. Now it doesn't happen. It's the culture kind of changed, you know, which is a bummer. Um, and that's something that that's a challenge now, um it was kind of a similar thing. Well, 55 bar was a little different, but it was a similar thing. Like if you Monday nights now are really hard nights to play, but at the time, I would say that for about 15 years or something like that, it was, people would show up, and I think the culture has changed, and now it's like less of something, and there's less people that just like, it's harder to grab people to show up regularly, you know?
Now, if somebody wanted to start a gig like that, like a consistent, like we'll call it a quote unquote residency, right? Um, how would you approach a venue like that? Like if you were to approach somebody now?
I never approached uh, them to say, hey, I want to play every week. Again, the way it started is I started to play once a month. And then then after a while, I had kind of a relationship with them. And then I did this live album. So when I did the live album, I think I played maybe twice a month for a couple of weeks. And I think after that, the guy, I don't know, after that, I think I started, maybe that's when Willie joined my band. And then I just asked the owner, because at the time he was pretty supportive. I was like, hey, can I do every week? And he said, yeah, sure. Also because it was a weeknight. Monday night was a dead night for them. So for him to have somebody play every Monday night at like 10:30 and bring a bunch of people and play with some, good musicians. So for him, it was probably great. But I wouldn't approach a club and go like, hey, I want to play there every week. I would develop some kind of relationship before.
So one of the other people that also was famous from the bitter end was Gavin DeGraw. And Gavin is someone you have a relationship with, and honestly, it seems like you kind of rekindled a bit of a relationship after many years off. I know you just played on his re-recording of Chariot 20, and also you just performed on television with him a couple of times.
I just played with him a week ago, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
And so, however, you also played with him when he was an up and coming artist, and kind of worked with him all the way up into really his major label debut. And so my question is to you, as somebody who is far more of I wouldn't say experimental, but I hate using this term, but you kind of fall into this a little bit, but fusion guitar player. What was your approach to playing with somebody like Gavin DeGraw, who was a developing artist and up and coming talent, as opposed to your solo career?
Okay, so the thing that a lot of people don't know about me, and it kind of relates a little bit to the beginning of my career in New York. I've been a studio guitar player since I've been pretty much 16 or 15 years old. I've played pop and rock and studio and recordings and records since I'm really, really young. And when I moved to New York, I tried to do it, and I still do it sometimes. So I still do studio work. I still play pop music and rock stuff. But what happened is, when I when I moved to New York and I decided to put a band together and play, I didn't really realize that people would tag you as like, oh, he's a solo guy, he does this thing. So all my years in New York, I had to kind of, not really, I wouldn't say fight for it, but I had to always kind of make sure that people know that this is not all I'm doing. And all my good friends and people on the scene here, they know that I can do the other stuff. That's why I get called to play with Gavin or to do some other stuff. But I'm not like a famous studio guy, you know what I mean? So, but I've been doing studio work since I'm a teenager. I can do it in the middle of the night. I can do it in my sleep, you know what I mean? So, um, when I do that kind of stuff, none of the jazz stuff gets in unless it needs to. I always had this ability to kind of disconnect, you know what I mean, and do what's necessary for the song or for the artist. And that's something that because I was playing with famous, like, singer songwriter artists since I'm a kid in Israel, it was, to me, I never went away. I did the session yesterday for something like, like that. But the more you get famous at doing something, the more you get categorized like, oh, he's this virtuoso guy that does this, which I understand. But people that know me know that I can do the other thing. That's why I get called sometimes to do, pop stuff or to be in house bands or that kind of stuff. But I have to fight for it a little bit, because even it's kind of interesting, the perspective, the perception of people. Because even my best friends that I work with, and I call them, if I produce a record, something, I call them to play on records. It's still, you have to kind of have it in their mind that, hey, although I'm going on tour playing this heavy jazz stuff, you can still call me for a pop record. You know what I mean? It's kind of, it's a challenge. So that's kind of the thing. The thing with Gavin though is, I basically met Gavin. The first gig he ever done in New York, I played with him. What happened was, there was a club named Wilson's in the Upper West Side, and they had this jam session going on, and it was an R&B jam session, so it was pretty heavy. Like, like Prince used to go there after a show and do a set, or like, I don't know, like Stevie Wonder come and sit in. It was pretty serious, but they had this R&B jam session. And one night, apparently, Gavin came and sat in, and somebody called the owner of the club. Her name was Debbie Wilson. Says like, hey, you gotta come check out this kid. So she came and saw him, and she knew Nile Rodgers, and then she connected Gavin with Nile, and she called me and a couple other guys and said like, hey, can you play with this new kid that I'm thinking of managing? And that was 2000 or 1999, around then. And that was the first time I played with him. And the first couple of years, maybe it was 2 to 3 years, I played pop with him all the time, but in the same time I would do the Bitter End gig, not regularly yet, but I was just kind of trying to do everything to just be noticed. So I guess I got more famous for playing instrumental music than for playing for artists. That's pretty much. And I've played, but I've been in touch with Gavin all those years. Like when he got signed and his record became big, I still would work with him here and there. I wasn't in the band, but I would do a recording here and there or some little things. There was a couple of times there were some talks about touring, but that never happened. And then a year ago, he contacted me to do some stuff in New York. And then after that, we started to kind of play again. But I'm not playing regular with him. I just do stuff. But we always stayed in touch. He would call me when he's in town and stuff. It never was like completely out of contact.
Was it something for you where you saw like a way to develop an artist? Like, were you along? Was it kind of a thing where you were along for the ride with him, or was that like a game plan for you, or was it more of just like, this is just another gig?
Well, I'll tell you a story. It's kind of not a. It's a typical thing that happened in the industry, and when you're young, it just happened to you, and you get hurt from it. But it just how it works. So when I started to play with him, we always had a really good connection playing together. Even now when we play together, it's like almost like it clicks right away. It's like the way he sings and play and write, that just really fits with the way I play. So we used to do that, and I was his. We used to play for 2 years, just me and him, acoustic guitar and piano. Everybody in the industry used to come and watch it. After 2 years, I got a band for him. I was like, Gavin, let's start doing a band. It's kind of boring to just do two guitar and piano. And then we kept doing showcases till he got signed. But at some point, there was some weird stuff that went down that always happens in pop music in the pop world. And I didn't really quit, but I stopped doing it regularly. And I told him, hey, call me when you really need me and you have money, kind of thing. So that went on for a while too. But what happened was he ended up going to LA to record his first album. And because I had so much connection with him, and I remember him writing a lot of those hits, and we used to play them. So automatically what happened, is you develop riffs or lines or all sort of stuff that becomes identical with his songs. And then when he went to LA to record, the thing that everybody that is with a developing artist wants to do is, oh, he needs to call me for the album. And they don't understand that when somebody does an album, it's got nothing to do with you or anybody that plays with him. It's rare. It's usually they hire a producer, producer brings his own people. So that was kind of a big hit for me and for a couple other guys, because we were kind of like, especially I was kind of developing the music with him in a way, you know. But when he came down to do the studio album, he went to do it in LA with an LA producer that brought his own people. But this is the typical thing that happened, and I was already also on the other side of it. They end up recording some of the shows that we did, and they end up using some ideas that I created in his music. Did I get credit for it? No. But when you're young and you're kind of expecting this to happen, you get really pissed. But growing up later, I realized that this is a typical thing that happened with everybody. You know what I mean? And so I'm okay with it now. At the time, I was really pissed because when I heard the first album, I was like, "Oh, hey, this is my idea," you know, and kind of things like that. But it is what it is. Um, he called me to do the strip version of the album, so at least that was something. And that's like a typical thing. I've been on the other side when I got called to play on an album, and I listened to demos or to live shows, and I had to copy the part that somebody else played. So that's basically the what I wanted to kind of share. You know, just that kind of experience.
Yeah, and I love that insight because I think a lot of people are very precious about the music that they create, and so sometimes those stories do happen, and it's unfortunate, but you know, like you said, it's part of the industry. It's a business, right? And a producer's going to have their people on staff, and they're going to choose their guitar player. And if you were to on when you were back with Gavin and you were on the come up with him, do you think you would have done anything differently?
Not really. Well, you know, when you mean when he got signed and stuff, and he started to. I think you know, it's not a glamorous life to be on tour with artists like that in the beginning. You know what I mean? It's not like you're on a kind of world tour where it's like it's pretty rough in the beginning. So, you know, I don't know. Probably if I would have stayed with him and tour with him, I wouldn't do my solo albums, and then I would probably get more pop gigs. Like I got a couple of my friends to play with him, and one of them, a drummer, got on to play with a couple other really, really big pop artists, you know. So those kind of gigs leads more to those kind of gigs, you know. Um, I don't know. Maybe if I would stay there, I would play more pop gigs and not do my solo albums. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know.
Yeah, we interviewed Greg Howe very early in this podcast, the other fusion guitar player, and he kind of had he's one of the best, man. I love him. And he kind of gave a similar story, which was he was touring with Justin Timberlake, In Sync, all these people like that, and then eventually he just kind of reached a breaking point, and it became I need to express myself and stop playing 3-chord pop songs. He just kind of got fed up with it, and so I think there is that balance there, especially as a musician who likes complex music, where you want to make money and have fun, but at the same time you also want to express yourself. So I think I totally understand what you're coming from with that.
I think um the thing is, you know, what everybody wants to do is to play on the records because that stays. You know what I mean? That's like the luxury gig is to play on the albums. To do tours, it could be cool because you're playing live and stuff. Could be challenging for many reasons, but you're very interchangeable on tours. You know, if something goes down and yeah, you can't do the gig or they don't like you, they call somebody else that will just play the same parts that are on the record. It's really not a big deal. It's rare. It happens, but it's rare to have certain guys stay with a certain artist because they're just irreplaceable. You know, it happens, but it's so rare. Most of those pop gigs are just like revolving doors. You know what I mean?
So, one of the things I'm really fascinated about is because you seem to be very selective about the gigs you do take. For example, you did, I believe, at least 2 tours with Idina Menzel, the famous Broadway singer, and you've done a few other things and like Gavin DeGraw and stuff like that. And my question to you is, what is your criteria for taking a gig, and what are obvious signs that a gig is a terrible idea to take?
Well, it's very simple. It's I don't know if I'm gonna say it in the right order, but money, hang, and music. Those are the three criteria. So, money, if the money is really good or really, really, really good, then that makes you think. Then there's the hang where, okay, is the band really good? Is everybody cool? And then the third thing is the music. Can you handle the music? Is the music cool? Is the music not cool? So I think Tommy Tedesco, somebody, there was some kind of thing where they say if you get 2 out of the 3, you should do the gig. You know what I mean? So if the hang is good and the music is good, do the gig. If the money is good and the music is good, or one of those. So I think the criteria is what it pretty much, it's those 3 things, and then you kind of go like, okay, is it worth it? Um, in the case of Adina, I got called last minute to jump in, and I had a free summer. And the guy that called me, Clifford Carter, I've worked with him a lot, and the band was really slamming. I knew everybody in the band, so I was like, sure, I'll do it, because the band was class A. So things like that immediately kind of grab you. And I didn't really know much about her music, but she's a lovely woman. I never was into Broadway stuff. I subbed on a couple of shows over the years, but so I just jump in and did it. And it was just 2 months of touring, which was it was cool. Sometimes those things just come up and you're just like, oh sure, summer, I'll do it.
Have you taken any terrible gigs?
Yeah. I would say I probably did take terrible gigs, but there was, sometimes you have to remind yourself, you go like, I don't work in the bank. I don't work I don't know, I don't deliver packages. I don't work in like a restaurant. And, so, I'm basically on a constant vacation my whole life. You know what I mean? I do what I love. It's sometimes hard, sometimes easy, and I play guitar, which is this thing that I like to do the most. So even if I'm on a gig that's terrible, which happened, I'm sure, many, many times, it's not as bad, because at the end of the day, I I probably make decent money or good money, and I still play guitar. You know what I mean? So it doesn't get too deep into my psyche. You know what I mean? It's not that I have to wake up at 6 in the morning and, I don't know, work for 12 hours and do something that I hate doing. You know what I mean? So I probably did plenty of mediocre to bad gigs, but I don't really care.
A gig is a gig, right? It's all about perspective.
Yeah, it really is. It's just what it is. It's totally cool. I'm like, as long as I'm playing, it's fine, you know?
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about actual music now. One of the things I really love about your output as a solo artist, as a band leader, is a lot of your records are tied together with themes. And it seems like themes is a big part of what you do. For example, you've got Twisted Blues Volumes 1 and 2, which are kind of your take on, I mean, it's in the title, Twisted Blues. Your latest record is your first kind of straight ahead jazz record, fun one. How important is it for you to have a theme for your records, and what comes first, the music or the theme?
Good question. I think in order to kind of be a solo artist, you have to have some kind of a concept in your head of what you want to sound like or what music you want to do. So, um, in the beginning, I didn't really have an actual theme. You know what I mean? Like the first, maybe the horror records, up to Schizophrenic, I didn't really have a theme. Like High and Fuzzy, and even the live album, there weren't really a theme to it. The only thing is I wanted to do is I knew that I like to do groove music and kind of more contemporary grooves, but harmonically, I knew that I can play all my jazz stuff on it. So that's kind of pretty much what I did. And then I wrote these tunes that just happened. They they pretty much came out of a lot of them came out of really drum grooves and like contemporary kind of grooves. I would like think about a drum groove or come up with some certain kind of grooves or tempos, and I would put a bass line or a guitar riff, and that's how I would write. So there wasn't a theme. It was more like, okay, this is kind of the concept of my band. When I did Schizophrenic, I actually wanted to do a record with songs that are um I don't know if there was still quite a theme, but like, but it was more like songs, like catchy songs, maybe, or songs that had some kind of yeah, I guess like catchy songs. Maybe that was it. I can't say pop because it's not pop, but it's like the concept was like having hooks. So I had tunes that I was writing, and they kind of fit that album. That I thought, okay, that's kind of, um, I guess, not easy listening, but there's some hooks there that you can grab. It's not like this kind of heavy jazz stuff where it's a whole vibe, but you can't really grab much. You know. And then when I started to do Twisted Blues Volume One, Volume Two was a complete concept. It was a theme. Like I was like, okay, I really like blues. I really like Hendrix. I really like Stevie Ray Vaughan. But I also like Thelonious Monk and Charlie Parker. So what would happen if I would take blues forms, which is shuffles or or like rumbas or stuff like that, and I would play and I would write tunes that are harmonically more complex, like jazzier. And that's what I did on those two albums. And so the themes kind of come first in that case, in that situation, because I knew what I was going for. And after those two albums, the next album was Who Gives a Funk. And on that album, I actually wanted to do like an R&B funk album. Simple. So to write simple stuff is the hardest. Write simple stuff with hooks is the hardest thing to do. So again, the theme came first. So I was first of all thinking, okay, this is what it's gonna be like, some simple R&B funk stuff. So I had to write in that way, or like find tunes that work that way. After that, Who Gives a Funk? Did I do Booga Loogaloo? Yeah, I think I did Booga Loogaloo. So then Booga Loogaloo, no, I did Booga Loogaloo, and then I did Snapdragon. And those two albums were actually, the theme behind it was like I wanted to do kind of more like a Boogaloo style kind of album, which I don't know if it's connect to people now, but if you listen to the first one, there was when I meant Boogaloo, I meant like it meant to be when jazz kind of became electrified. So like I started to listen to those like CTI Freddie Hubbard records when they started to use electric bass, or like all this kind of like Lou Donaldson album. So that were the team, the and then I was write in that style, or try to write in that style, or I find tunes that will work in that style. So that's pretty much how it is. And the last album that I did, Fun One, there wasn't really any theme to it. It was just basically, I knew I always played jazz, like straight ahead jazz. Actually, I used to play once a month, sometimes twice a month, but usually once a month at the 55 bar in New York for many, many years. And that's where I would play my jazz band. So I always played jazz. I had a jazz trio, a quartet, and I had all these tunes with arrangements. So I just, when uh when I was able to record for Crisscross Records, I just already had the music and the band, so it was pretty easy to do.
So, one of the things I really love about your work as well is not only do you write such fun songs, but you also tend to rearrange. I've heard you affectionately called it dearranging.
Deranging.
Eh, yes, right. And like on your last record, for example, on Fun One, now I might be getting the theory kind of wrong here, but as far as I understand it, you took giant steps and you kind of made it into a minor ballad as opposed to the normal the major. That's not really major, but it's all over the place. And so, what makes arranging tunes for you fun? And what does that process of rearranging songs look like for you?
Well, I don't see any reason to play a tune the way somebody else played it. I don't play anything. I can play tunes for fun with people or even at a gig and not care. But I don't see any reason to record something unless you have a little stamp on it that okay, I did my own little thing on it. So that's pretty much what it is. So when I decide to play tunes, I have to have some kind of an angle on them, And that was happening way before I did a jazz album, and Twisted Blues Volume 1, I recorded two Thelonious Monk tunes, and I've done them more like as a blues kind of vibe. And I've done stuff like that all over my records over the years. Um, so I just don't see a reason to record something that somebody else wrote unless you have like an angle, a strong angle. So that a lot of times mean rearranging the song. Now, rearranging can be a lot of things and can be changing the time signature of the song, doing a whole other arrangement of it, changing the time, the tempo, like the chords, the harmony. So I don't really necessarily look for that stuff. It's just because I play a lot live, a lot of times during playing like some gigs, things kind of come up in my head or during a gig, like I don't know how Giant Steps came about, but I think maybe I was playing some kind of a jazz gig somewhere and I started to play it really slow and we just kept going. I think that's the same thing with I recorded Evidence by Thelonious Monk. I did a version of it in my second album. It was like a kind of a fast, funky 3/4, and then I did it on a later version where I played it slow, like really slow. So those things sometimes just either they happen to me at home when I sit at home and I mess around and suddenly I go like, oh, that's cool, or in a gig. So when that happens, I'm lucky, you know what I mean? Because then I go, okay, this is my own little twist on it, and then I kind of develop it. So the Fun One album, actually, all the tunes that are in there are standards except the Fun One. There's the tune that I wrote, and all of them are basically rearrangements of standards. So they're on. I think the only tune that maybe is straight up is I played Solar in 7/4, but it was nothing different in the harmony or stuff like that. But every other tune, I either changed the groove or the time signature. I had some kicks or licks or like different rhythms or different harmony, stuff like that.
How about picking songs to? I mean, I guess you kind of answered this a little bit, but and when on say like Twisted Blues, for example, you guys did Sissy Strut and you changed the key of the A section.
Well, I did. Yeah, I also moved the line. I switched the melody a little bit, so it sounds like it's not in 4/4, but it actually is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So how do you pick these tunes to? Is it just songs that again? Is it just all playing live, like figuring out stuff live?
Sometimes some stuff like Sissy Strut, I think I messed around with it, and the displacement of the rhythm came, and I just grabbed it and I was like, oh, this is cool. I think I messed around with it at home, and it just happened. I was like, oh, let me try to do it like that, and I wrote it down, and then the bridge kind of happened. But there's other tunes that I think yeah, again, it just happened. It could happen at a gig. Um, I try to stay open, you know what I mean? Like I'll play certain tunes that I like or that I heard that are cool, and I'll play them, and then sometimes it just doesn't, nothing special happens. So I don't record them. Maybe I'll play them, but I'm not gonna record them. But usually I just have to get lucky and something just kind of happens, whether I'm playing live or I remember actually one time I remember it actually well. I was about to play a gig at the bitter end and I started to play this riff on the guitar. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So I called the sound man. I was like, hey, can you record this for me really quick? It was kind of before you had an iPhone that you can do. And he did, and that I wrote a tune that was based on that. So it's stuff like that. You just have to be aware when it's happening and you have to grab it.
So the other great thing about your recording output, like we kind of mentioned earlier, is just the list of musicians that are just again like world class guys. And I know you're in New York, so it's a little bit easier to get great drummers and stuff. Like, I mean, but what I think I'm really interested in is kind of like the whole process of how you get those people there. And what I kind of want to know is when you are ready to go and record a record, are you giving people charts? Are you giving people demos? How are you preparing the musicians? Because I think a lot of people, in my experience as a producer, I have noticed that people tend to go in unprepared. And how I guess what is your preparation process like? What's pre-production like for you?
My preparation is playing every week with the band for a year. That when we go into the studio, everybody knows what the fuck they're doing, and we're just playing. That's been my process since the first album. And I was on the last album when, for example, certain on Fun One on the jazz album, I wasn't able to play for a year, but I played with David Gajkowski for many years, and we played a lot of those tunes before. So I've done a bunch of months of gigs at the bitter end with a band similar to that or with that band. So when we went into the studio, we already did a bunch of gigs playing that music. I would never ever go to a studio and record without playing the music at least a few times because it doesn't gel. Um, on old records of mine, I would play when I had my New York band with Anton Fig and Willie and James Eunice and Kid Carlock. We played every week. So when we got in the studio, we were already playing those tunes. They were ready. We played sometimes a year before we go in. And it's not that those guys can't go in and look at the chart and play it, but it's not gonna gel the same way. It's just not gonna sound as cohesive, as organic. Um, it was the same on all my other records. Like, I used I used Dave Weckl a lot, Vinnie Colaiuta. The only guy that was kind of a little bit of a different story is Vinnie, because I don't tour with Vinnie. So I remember the first time he played on my record, I told him, hey man, we got to do a gig. We got to play it. So we did a gig and then we went and recorded a couple of tunes. But that's pretty much the only guy. Everybody else, whether it's Weckl, Dennis Chambers, or I play with those guys enough before to know what's up. And the rest of the band would play the tunes a lot. Like when we come into the studio, there's no questions of what to do, you know? Oh, figuring out a bar or something. It was there. We just go in and we just try to play and get the best takes.
Now, with the themed records, like Twisted Blues and everything like that, uh, does the selection of musicians, does that happen organically with you for the recording, going from live playing to recording?
So this is an interesting question. So the first there's certain albums that I did that I only used New York musicians. So that was really easy because, for example, when I did Who Gives a Funk, I used to play a lot with this great drummer named Steve Wolf and another great drummer named Rocky Bryan. So I just knew that I'm going to use them on the album. So we just did a lot of live gigs before we recorded. And so we went in. So it was easy to do that because they're all in New York. Same thing when I did all those records with Anton Fig and Keith Carlock. They live in New York. It's a little more challenging when you have guys that don't live in the city. So then you have to go out and do gigs or do a tour and then go and record. But I would have an idea of who I would like to play on the tunes that I wrote before I would sometimes even write them. So I'll go like, okay, I want to write something that, I don't know, like Dave Weckl would sound good on, or like Vinnie Colaiuta would sound good on. So I would kind of have that in mind already before. So then when it was time to record, I would just make sure that everybody's available for the recording. But I was also making sure that we can play a bunch of that stuff before. And usually it worked out. There was one song that I recorded. I'm not going to name the name of the drummer, and I'm not going to name the name of the drummer that replaced him. But there was one song that I did in all my albums that I recorded, and it was with a very well-known drummer. And I play with that guy all the time. He's the greatest. But somehow it did not work on that tune. And I remember I called a good friend of mine, drummer. I goes like, what do you think about this? He goes like, well, it sounds good, but it doesn't sound like, oh, you know what I mean? Like amazingly good. So I had to call somebody else to replace it. But it was only once in all my records,
We're just gonna assume it's Dave Weckl. We're just gonna assume it's him.
No, no, but things like that can happen. But usually I'm lucky enough to get what I want because I know how those guys play and what I get out of them. Another thing that I do, and it's just that's just me because I'm kind of picky about that stuff. I like to use rhythm sections that play really well together. So, for example, I don't know, just as an example, Steve Ferroni and Willie done gazillion records together. They play really good together. Willie and Anton Fick played together for 30 something years, the Letterman show. I don't know, Patitucci and Vinnie Colaiuta used to play many, many years together. The guys from, like Chris Layton and Roscoe Beck and Reese Winans, they played in Austin with Stevie Ray Vaughan, all those guys for years. So I like to put people together that really already have the connection. I don't like to bring somebody from here and somebody from there and go like, hey, good luck, you know? And it's not that it's not going to sound good. Like you can, in that level of playing, you can make anybody sound good with another person, but you'll be surprised. Sometimes there's some kind of click that just doesn't happen the same way. And I'm really sensitive to that. I feel like if there's no vibe, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I was lucky enough to be able to get good teams together.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the pre-production phase of your records. So, how we find musicians, we're gigging,
Yeah.
we are putting ourselves out there.
Yeah.
Now let's go to recording day.
Yeah.
Like you've got the musicians,
Mm-hmm.
we know the tunes, we're going in there. What is that process like for you? How long does the process take? I mean, these are guys that a lot of times they're one or two take guys.
Good question. Yes.
And so how do you keep that vibe? How do you keep spirits high? How do you keep the energy there? When problems arrive, how do you solve them? What kind of things are you doing as a band leader on recording day?
So let's start with the bottom line. The bottom line is I don't have big budgets for my albums. I pretty much have jazz budgets for my albums, and I have to record an album in, if I'm lucky, it's 3 days. Usually it's 2. So recording 10 songs in 2 days, that's not easy at all. That's basically 5 songs a day. Now, if it was the type of records where you bring professional musician charts or you do a rehearsal and you just get a take and then people fix, then it would be one thing. But my records are completely not that. My records are about playing organically and get good takes together. And sometimes my guys get pissed at me because I do a lot of takes. And the reason I do a lot of takes is because I've done over 10 solo albums, or by this point, I think it's 13 or 14. I never choose a first take, ever. Because it just doesn't sound organic with the band. It's something about it. It takes sometimes a few takes for the stuff to just gel, And so even Vinny and Will and those guys that are, one take guys, I told them before the recording, I was like, hey, we're doing a bunch of takes, so don't give me shit about it, And they're okay with it. Sometimes they get a little pissed, but I proved myself with that, you know what I mean? Because I don't do fixes. I record those records as jazz albums. I don't go and fix guitar parts and come to the studio later. What I do is I edit them later. So I try to take the whole performance or whole section with interaction and everything. And if I'm lucky to get a whole take, great, but it's rare that it happens. So you have to it's like a little puzzle that you put together, but it has to still be organic. And if I would have done it the other way, then let's say, I don't know, the rhythm section got a good take on the first take. Who gives a shit? It didn't really like gel with the rest of the band. You know what I mean? There wasn't a full vibe with everybody else. So that's how it works. So basically what happened is we try to get sounds the night before, and then we come into the studio and we just play. I don't change arrangements. I don't do anything. We just come in and we try to get good takes. So it's usually, I would say, a minimum of between 4 and 6 takes. And we play, when you think about it, usually a song is, let's say, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. So, 5, let's say, it's about half an hour of playing a song, you know what I mean? And I usually get sometimes, we play, and then at some point you realize, okay, we're over the hump. It started to go down, so then we stop. That's pretty much all it is. Some of the guys are not always happy about it, but I kind of I hear where it goes, where it gets good, and then where it starts to go bad, and then I stop. So it's long days. Like you end up playing a lot. It's kind of exhausting in a way. But again, if I had a budget where I can go and fix my parts or do this again and that again, sure. But it's just budgets. I have to just go in and play as best as I can and get the best takes with the band. Then I go home and I deal with it.
Now, another thing that, in my experience recording albums that I've experienced, is some songs just don't make the cutting room floor. Or they stay on the cutting room floor, right? They don't make it onto the record. And when you are on such tight deadlines like that, and you're doing so many takes, is there ever a point where you go, the song's just not working, we're cutting
No,
it from the record?
no,
Or
never.
you go in knowing what 10 songs you're going to do, and that's what comes
Yeah,
out as those 10
because
songs?
exactly, because I play this stuff live enough in advance before to know if it's working or not. What will happen in the studio, and that happened to me many times, is a song that seems to be an easy one to record turns into be a hard one, and then the opposite. That's always a mind fuck. That's something that I never ever, you never know what you're gonna get stuck on. And sometimes the thing with, when you play live, again, I'm making kind of jazz albums where it doesn't sound like jazz and it's more groove, and it's still, the approach is like playing live. So when you're playing live, there's a certain energy. The sound is not in your head with headphones, it's in the room. So it's a different kind of thing. And when you're in the studio, everything is so precise and in your head that it takes a while to get used to that and to get to that same level of performance or spontaneity. You know what I mean? And sometimes the thing with tempos and energy, it kind of gets tricky, because when you're in a studio, everything is like, you can, like, it's so specific and precise that you have, okay, you have to decide on the tempo, or you have to make sure you start in the right tempo. It's things like that when you play live, it just happens. You don't really think about it. So that's really the challenging things about being in those kind of situations for me.
And then when you guys are recording, and I'm assuming you're cutting this live.
Very much so.
And so when you are cutting these live, how are you guys situated in a room? Does that matter to you at all?
Yes,
I mean,
very
obviously
much.
you have to for acoustic reasons and engineering reasons, but I mean, are there blankets up? Are you guys able? Are there isolation booths for the drums? How are you guys looking at each other? I mean, how are you signaling to the musicians? Like, is there any of that, or just everyone just has this music and muscle memory at this point? Like, I'm
No,
very curious.
I think everybody's looking at charts except of me. You have to have eye contact with everybody. So whatever studio you're in, everybody has to see everybody at all times. So you have to, usually the drums are in a booth by themselves, and then you're next to the bass player and the organ player, keyboard player, and we can all see the drummer. So it has to be a studio where that's possible. Otherwise, I can't do it. Because again, you have to think about it. It's live recording. It's like we're doing it like we're playing a gig. We have to look at each other. We have to see what's up. So that's one thing. The other thing is you have to have also isolation for guitar amps and, let's say, Leslie and stuff. So it has to be done in a certain way where that happens too. Because otherwise, if there's too much leakage, it gets to be problematic. So there are studios that are just plenty that are equipped to do that. So I just have to find a room that has that. I can't record in rooms that don't have that ability.
So then, one of the other things you talked about too was the night before the recording, like going in there and prepping tones and stuff like that. Will you guys run through a couple songs to get tones correct, like or not correct, but good enough? Or
That the doing the thing before is just my own little trip, because I know that if we have to do a lot of songs in one day, it's tricky. I've done recordings where we did the sound, we got the sound in the morning, we just kept going. Um, Again, because I don't have budgets where I can start messing around with sounds and stuff, I just, we get good drum sounds. Everything else pretty easy to get. The guitar tones, I just put the amps that I like, the way that I know they're set up to sound good. I put them, the engineer puts mics on it, and then I just hope for the best. I don't have time to fuck around with it, unfortunately. And on that note, I would say that I had records that I got good guitar tones. I had records that I didn't get great guitar tones. And I wish I could fix it, but it was just what it was. It's just like I don't have the budgets to start messing around. So it's a lot of it is just luck. I'm just like, oh, I hope this is good enough. And then you play and you just try to get good takes.
Now, what about energy in the studio as far as like personalities and things like that? That can something obviously recording is actually for most people is a very stressful thing, and being a band leader is even more stressful because it's your project, your name's on it. Things might not go according to plan, things like that. And so my question to you is, how do you manage stress when you are recording on recording day?
Most of the guys that I play with have been in the studio like 1,000 hours more than I have. So, they're very, they can handle a lot. I just, the guy, it's not that I meet the guys for the first time. We play before, so we're friends. We know the music. We just try to do our best. Usually there's no tension. Sometimes somebody will bug out for whatever reason. So you give them a little time to chill and then come back and play. Usually there's really no drama in these recordings. You know what I mean? The only thing is sometimes maybe somebody will go, oh, I'm done. I don't have another take in me. Or somebody go like, oh, I sucked on this thing, blah, blah, blah. But it's usually good vibes. It's just everybody knows that it's work and it has to be done quick because there's no budget to sit and record one song a day or two songs a day. So everybody knows how it works. So everybody's hopefully gets a good night's sleep the night before.
That's a big part of it, man. Is not going out going crazy the night before.
Oh
So
my
good
God,
night's sleep
yeah.
will do everything. So all right, so we talked about the pre-production. We talked about recording day. We've done the 2 days, maybe 3 if we're lucky. We're now at the post-production phase. So when we get there, how long of a time do you take between recording day and entering the mixing phase?
If it was up, I always try to not listen to the stuff for, if I can afford it, I don't listen to the stuff for a month at least, because I want to completely forget everything that happened. So then when I listen to it again, after a month, I'm completely fresh, so I can listen to takes without any pre-knowledge. Like, oh, I remember the fourth take on this song was good, and because it's usually not not what's really happening. Usually, you play the song and you go like, oh, I remember the third take was great, and then if you listen to it a month later and you listen to all the other takes, you go like, maybe not. So that's why. So I would say that in a perfect world, I would wait a month and then it would take me about a week a song to edit and choose the takes and do whatever. If there's even any little overdubs, usually it's just keyboards and stuff like that, or like, then I'll do that. So, think about like, let's say I have 8 songs, so it's like a month and a half. And then, so basically it takes me 2 months to edit a record and finish it pre-production. And then mixing is just mixing. It takes whatever it takes to whoever I give it to.
And then on that, are you doing the editing as far
Yes.
as put it?
Yeah.
So you're popping up Pro Tools and just slice.
Yeah. I try to make, again, when it's a studio album and I record a lot of times on a click, then it's a little more produced. So I have a little more options of kind of like fine tuning it a little bit, or like do like heavier edits if I think, oh, this section has a really cool whatever in there, because I'm trying to make it sound as good as I can. But if I did like a live album, or let's say like live, I did 2 or 3 live albums. So with that, I just try to choose a full take for whatever it is, or a big chunk of one take and a big chunk of another take. Like On the jazz album, on Fun One, it was pretty much like doing a live album because I just tried to choose the best take and maybe putting together, let's say this take had a really good head and a really good guitar solo, and the piano solo was from a different take. I just tried to do that. So the editing on like on the jazz album or a live album are a lot less than on a studio album, you know?
And then are you using any sort of like melodyne or quantization or anything
I
like
don't do any
that?
quantization. I would somehow, if I hit a wrong note, I would change that note. I've done it a couple of times on stuff. I'm not ashamed of it. Because other people will fix it in the studio. I just don't have the budget to go and put my gear again, and. So I do that way. Um, I would I would not do it a lot, but if a bass note, people fuck up all the time. So I'll take a chord or a bass note that was wrong and switch it and put it in another place just to fix the mistake. Things like that, little things like that. But it takes a while. If somebody was, I don't put everything perfect. I try to keep the performance the way it is with the groove. But if somebody was a late on a hit, I'll move him a little bit. It's not a big deal.
So we get to the mixing phase, the record's mixed, possibly mastered, forget the budget. And at what point does a label enter into the picture?
I got lucky throughout my career where all the labels that I was on, they didn't really tell me anything. They just tell me, okay, finish the record and deliver it to us by this date, and that was it. So I don't think I'm trying to think if was there ever a situation where they were telling me something. I don't think so. I was always, I just did what I did. I recorded it and I delivered it to them, and that's it.
And then what purpose does a record label serve you in 2025? A lot of people think that it's an
It's
outdated
only
method. It's
distribution.
okay.
It's distribution and some PR, which you can do yourself. I've been on the label that I've been on for since Twisted Blues Volume 1 is Abstract Logic. So they also manage me and book me. So it doesn't make sense for me to do stuff on other labels, except of the last album that I did for Crisscross. So it's pretty simple, I don't have to deal with all that stuff. I just give them the record. They have a person that does PR, they have all the distribution. That's it.
Okay. And then when you are on the post mixing phase before the record has come out, how do you figure out song order and cover art and things like that?
I sometimes I go like, man, I wish I had a producer or somebody assisting me and stuff, but I don't. So artwork is, I have one or a few people that I know that do really good art. There's this one girl that's been doing stuff for me forever, so she's great. And I just call her and I say like, hey, this is the vibe I have in mind. Usually I have some kind of an idea, go for it, and eventually she nails it. Um, Song order. This is actually an interesting thing with song order. Songs always come to life. You realize what sounds the best after it's mixed. Some songs you go like, oh man, this is great, and then somehow after the mix you go like, yeah, but this song actually shines more. So you can never do a song order before the mixes are done, which is kind of an interesting thing, because when you play live, you know what you're going to play in order because of the vibe of the song, but somehow in the studio, so it's just different. So I wait till the mixes are done, and then I make a song order of what I think flows the best.
Going away from the kind of the album vibe, one thing I really do love about you is you use gear in very interesting ways. You find a lot of really creative noises, you find a lot of creative textures, and I really try to avoid with this podcast to end up being like a gear, like, oh, tell me what you use kind of podcast, because we want to be applicable to everybody, right? Not just guitar players. And so, my question to you, as someone who does use gear in so many interesting ways, has gear ever been a hindrance to your creativity? And how do you think about gear in the creative process?
Well, I think I have a mixed like the answer is a little kind of mixed both ways. Meaning, sometimes, I have pretty big pedal boards sometimes, and those pedal boards, that gear helped me create the music I created, because it's almost like I orchestrate with some of those effects. Because when you play a trio, there's so much space to do stuff. So a lot of the tricks or things that I've done over the years, they happen because I had the space in my band to introduce different sounds, and I was aware of it, and I was able to find different sound of work for different song or different sections, and they became like literally a part of the arrangement. So that's the good part of gear. The bad part of gear is the fact that sometimes it takes away, like, I remember one time I was in China and they didn't have a transformer for me to plug in my pedal board, so I had to do my whole gig with a wah-wah and a fuzz pedal. And it was so liberating in a way when I was like, oh fuck, wow, this is so cool. So a lot of the times having too many options in front of you are kind of throwing you off also. So it's like I have mixed, let's put it like that. I would never write using all my pedals. I was always try to write more, just be bare with a sound. You can have a delay or a reverb or a fuzz or something, but I would never have the whole sound process kind of thing and write something. That would always come later. So it's liberating to just be able to play on one with one or two pedals and get the tone and be done. But also, when you're doing a tour with a trio, you have to make it interesting. So effects like loops and delays and Leslie's and tremolos, they make the music richer, because it does sound more interesting. It's just what it is. Um, I would say one thing, the interesting thing is, um, I use a lot of exotic pedals, and they've been always nice to me. And I had a signature pedal with them and everything like that. But when I started using exotic pedals, I got this pedal from them called the BB Booster, and that's been my pedal, my to-go pedal for like 20 years. So every time I go and sit in with somebody, I just take the pedal. And it's one of those pedals that just sounds good wherever you plug it in. So there is something kind of liberating about the fact that I don't have to bring my pedal board. I just bring that one pedal, and I'm kind of like, I can make it happen with that. And that's it's almost the opposite of what I do, you know. So I don't know. I don't have a clear answer. It's just like two sides of the same coin.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, what does practicing look like for you these days? And I guess one of the things I'm really fascinated about is you gig so much, and one of the things we've talked about a lot on this podcast is how you have created and how you have arranged songs and you try new things out live. But are there times that you practice? Like, is it a daily thing for you? Is it a thing of like just leave it up to the gigs to get your chops in order? How do you consider practicing these days? And has it changed since your early days, maybe in New York or
Yeah.
in Tel Aviv?
Yeah. You changed a lot. I have a lot less time now. So when I have time, I just try to practice basically exercises of sorts. You know what I mean? The thing about the finding tunes and stuff is a lot of my activities. Let's say I booked a couple of gigs, and one was with my jazz quartet, one is with my organ trio, another thing is with whoever. Then I try to put together a collection of tunes that will work good with that situation, or tunes that I work on. And that's where I find like ideas of what to play and how to play. So because I played live a lot, I'm able to creatively keep that part going. And then when I have time and I can focus, I try to practice. But I always try to noodle on the guitar and just keep my fingers going. Because with the age, it's kind of like it feels like it goes away a little bit. Like it doesn't go away a little bit. It feels like you have to always do it to kind of keep it warm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then, would you say are the things that you've practiced that have benefited you the most? And what are the things that you've practiced that have been the biggest waste of time?
Oof. That's a hard question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. Uh Waste of time. Things to practice that waste your time. I don't know. I have no idea. I would say that there is things that I work on, that I practice, that sometimes it will take a year or longer for it to get into my plane. It's a long process sometimes to get something in the beginning. When you start and you get progress really quick. But when you're already kind of established and you have your sound and a lot of vocabulary, you like developed in little steps. So sometimes those little steps take a long time. um yeah, I don't know anything about like useless exercising. I teach guitar. I teach at Berkeley, and I have some private students. So I think the one thing that could be a waste of time is, it's important to have technique. You know what I mean? So you have to be able to play whatever you have in your head, meaning you have to have good technique on the instrument. That's really important, but I think it's a waste of time to practice only technique. So if you practice technique, it has to have some kind of musicality in it. Otherwise, it's complete waste of time. That's my thought.
And what about things that have most benefited you in your practice times?
Uh, Most benefited me. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I can't think about anything that most benefited me. I have certain systems of how I like to practice things, like the scales and developing the scales into, I don't know, intervals and triads and arpeggios and voice leadings and all that stuff. Um, I have a couple of instructional books about that. So that stuff is beneficial for me to just learn new things. But is it the most? I don't know. Probably can find better things.
So, Oz, you have a very interesting place in guitar playing. And I don't want to make this necessarily a guitar playing podcast, but as a guitar player myself, one of the things I'm very fascinated about by you is your ability to jump around between genres so effortlessly. Like you could very easily play a rock gig, you can very easily play a jazz gig, you can very easily play a funk gig. And a lot of our audience are rock and rollers, people who've played just rock and roll. And my question to you is if jazz is kind of this thing for a lot of people that it's like, I wish I could jump into that world. And maybe I've been playing in a band for a few years and maybe I can, my pentatonic scale is great and I can play blues licks all day. I can play a solo to Stairway to Heaven, for example, right? Or something like that. But when it comes to jazz, it just seems so overwhelming. It just seems so much. What are some things like a rock musician, maybe specifically a guitar player in your instance, can do to I guess, dive more into that jazz world? What are some things they can do?
So I get that all the time because most of the people that come study with me, a lot of them has kind of the wrong idea about me because they hear my albums and they go like, oh, this is some, you play funk stuff and you play all this rock and blues stuff, but you play really weird, all this out stuff. So I explained to them, listen, I'm a jazz guitar player that plays, I'm basically a jazz guitar player. So my vocabulary is jazz, but I also played rock and blues and funk. So I can kind of combine them all together. But in terms of the studying aspect of it, and this is something that I have to deal with all the time, is in order to, the only way I know of how to teach modern harmony, which is jazz. Classical harmony is classical music, but modern harmony is more advanced harmony. It's not like 1, 2, 3, 5, like rock song, like Stairway to Heaven, and it's not a 12-bar blues. It's a little more advanced. It's through jazz. Now, people are really freaked out when they hear jazz because, oh, it's so much to do. The thing I tell everybody is you don't have to be, if you study jazz, it doesn't mean that you could turn into be a jazz musician. To be a jazz musician, it's like learning the whole language. Like you have to learn French, you have to learn the whole thing, you know, and it never ends really. But if you learn to develop your harmonic skills or your melodic skill through jazz, then it kind of makes things easy. It makes more sense. So basically, it means that you don't have to learn 100 jazz standards to play jazz. You can just learn 3 that are important, that have all those harmonic movements, and through that you can understand how it works, you know. So it's really overwhelming to people because they hear the word jazz and they listen to those records and go like, oh my god, this is like above my skills. But if you kind of started to get into it and understand where it's coming from, you don't have to be like the next Chick Corea, but you can develop your harmonic and melodic um, uh, possibilities, or like a sense, to the point where it's not only going to be 1-4-5 blues. You know what I mean? It could be a lot more than that, and it has to be through jazz. So do not fear jazz. It's okay. You just have to not jump into it thinking, oh, I gotta take all of this at once. It's just like, it's a certain kind of, it's basically music, and there's a certain way of kind of learning advanced harmony. That's pretty much all it is, to my opinion, at least.
Now, now that is a very good overview, and I love that. But what are some more tactile things? Like, what are some more I can play Stairway to Heaven. I can do 1-4-5 blues all day, but I really want to learn some jazz.
Okay. All you need to do, if there was 3, if you learn, I always tell it to students, I was like, if you can play a 12-bar blues 1-4-5, or the Charlie Parker 12-bar blues, which is like let's say Billy's Bounce, and then you can play a rhythm changes, which is originally is I Got Rhythm, but let's say Oleo or Anthropology or something like that. And then you can play minor blues, which is Mr. PC or Equinox, or The Thrill Is Gone, for that matter.
Really?
Yeah. So if you can play just those 3 forms, just those 3 things, you'll be okay. You'll learn a lot, and you'll be able to play over changes. If you can add Donna Lee into the picture, Confirmation, I don't know, All the Things You Are, Autumn Leaves, then you're really in business. You know what I mean? And it's not a lot. It's like, I'm not talking about learning 100 tunes. I'm talking about learning a few tunes that have all those harmonic movements, and knowing how to play on those harmonic movements. And you'll be in business pretty much. You know how it works.
Okay, so I love this. I think this is such a good way because it does feel like, okay, blues and, the 1-4-5, you could very easily go to a minor blues with that. You could very easily go to a major blues. You can very easily go to rhythm changes. So, Oz, would you be willing to give like 3 songs based on each one of those forms that someone could go and look up? Like, say, I have this idea that I want to learn jazz, but I don't know the vocabulary. I don't know the language yet, like we talked about.
So are you talking about solos or the songs?
The songs, like what are some
Okay,
songs that people can learn,
so
and maybe some recordings if you have any
okay,
recommendations.
Billy's Bounce, Charlie Parker. Donna Lee, Charlie Parker. Just learn the heads and the chords. Donna Lee, the head itself has all the bebop language in it. That's right there. It gives you so much. Rhythm changes, there's a lot of them out there, but let's say Anthropology or Dexterity, that's Charlie Parker. Just learn the heads. You don't have to learn the solos. If you learn Autumn Leaves, it's a really good tune to learn because it shows you how to move from like the 2-5 in major into the 2-5 minor. And that's pretty much a lot of those standards. It's all of that. It's those movements between the 2 and the 5 and the resolution. So All the Things You Are is a little more advanced, but that's a great tune to learn. If you want to learn a head that somebody wrote over All the Things You Are, you learn a thing called Prince Albert. So you learn all those heads, like you learn Prince Albert, like Donna Lee, on Billy's Bounce, Anthropology. Those tunes are tunes that just from learning the heads, you learn the language, and then harmonically, they all move kind of in the same way. There's a couple of tricks, and once you kind of learn how to maneuver those 2-5-1s, then you're in business. Like you kind of in the ballpark of how jazz works. Again, you can't do any of that before you know your scales and your triads and your arpeggios and all that stuff. It's not that it comes out of the blue, you know what I mean? You have to do the work as a guitar player, as a musician. Like music work a certain way. There's harmony and melody, so there's chords and scales. And you can't do half work. You gotta know the scales and you gotta know the chords, you know? And that's that, but that relates to playing rock and roll too, or other music, you know. It's just that maybe there's more scales or more exotic scales in jazz than in Stairway to Heaven, you know what I mean? Pretty much.
So, as along with the going into jazz for rock people, another thing that you are really good at that rock musicians tend to struggle with is odd time signatures. And you have all sorts of weird, zany, offbeat. I mean, but they don't feel out of place. Like you know how to throw a bar of 9 in there. You know how to throw a bar of 5 in your playing. And I guess from if I'm another guitar player, I can play Stairway to Heaven and I can play a few blues licks in A minor pentatonic. How do I think about learning odd time signatures and how to play odd time signatures?
Here's the it's a big misconceptions. I don't play an odd time signature. I don't like odd time signatures. It's really not my thing. The thing is, I can play in 7 and I can play in 5 because I know how they feel. It's almost like, you know, there's a certain feel to playing in 4 or in 3. And then there's a certain feeling to playing in 7 and in 5. So I can do that. That's considered to be odd time-ish. But to me, odd time signature, odd time playing is when you play certain things that are completely like you have a 9/8 bar here, you got a 7/8 bar there, you got a 5/4. I don't do that stuff. I never did. If you listen to my recordings, um, when I solo, when I play on stuff, it's normally in 4/4 or 3/4, or it's in one time signature, so you can feel the groove. What you're relating to, and I understand that, is when I write, I hear certain things, sometimes not even. So especially in my old recordings, I would write a lot of stuff where there would be a 9/8 bar there or 7/8 bar or suddenly a 3/4. And that's not me trying to be fancy, just that's how I heard that specific movement in the music. And that's why it happened. And I still think that way. Like if I write a tune and there's a line there that sits well as a 7/8 instead of a 4/4, I'll put that in. And that's what makes it sounds like it's odd time, because it's not even. But when I solo, it's rare that I'll solo on like an odd time bar thing. I always solo on stuff that feels like a straight groove, you know. And again, the last album I did, I recorded a Solar in 7/4. So that's not odd time. That's just like a different time signature with a different feel. You know, there's a lot of things that are in 7/4 or 5/4. But I don't play on stuff that has like a 4/4 bar, 8/7, 7/8 bar, 9/8 bar. I can't play on that shit. I never was able to. You know?
Well, even just playing in 7 or 5, like that, it's very off kilter for so many musicians. How
Well,
do
if
you
you
approach
play
playing in those?
jazz, okay, if you play jazz, there are certain forms that are 5/4, like take 5. Dong ping, ba-ting, dong ching, dong ching, ka-ting, boom, boom. That's 5. And if you hear that in your head, then it doesn't sound strange anymore. It just sounds like that's the sound of a 5/4. Same thing with 7/4, you know? So it's like 3/4, you know, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. So basically it's a waltz, but it can be other things, you know. So you just have to get used to those different time signatures. And it's not, I don't call those odd times. I just call them different time signatures, because we're just used to hearing everything in 4/4 or 3/4, you know, because it's really popular. But 5/4 or 7/4, it's manageable. Like there are songs like the Sting song 7 days, 7 da, da. That's in 5/4. So you know what I mean? Like if you hear that pattern of a 5/4, then you'll feel it, and then it's just normal, you know.
All right, Oz, this is the last question from the main interview section, and I always ask this to every guest. And I think it's a really good question because in these interviews we cover so much ground. And this last question is one I think that's really important, which is, do you have any regrets on your musical journey? And if so, what would you have done differently?
I do. Um, I don't know if I would have done it. The thing is, there's certain things I was going for in my earlier records that to me I wouldn't go for now. Like, I don't know, certain things were a little too rock and roll for me, or like I would probably not record them now. But it was a certain period, and this is what I was hearing. I would have definitely remixed or tried to get better mixes or tones on some of the recordings that I've done, but I can't. Um, I think the main problem is because of Spotify, that really damaged, to my opinion, a lot of. I would say to me, it kind of damaged my view of of my journey of where I'm going with my music, because what happens in Spotify is they put on the top the songs that everybody listens to the most. And from some reason, it could be anything, but it doesn't always represent what the artist really is or where the artist really is now in his career. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I'm really unhappy about. But hey, it's just what it is now, because when you're talking about Ha or like Schizophrenic, it's like ages ago. I'm not even connected to, like, I wrote it. I like some of those tunes, but in terms of playing it now, I'm not even connected to that. It's not what I do anymore. I'm doing something else now.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's the answer.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, Spotify. I mean, we could go on and on about it, but
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
no. Well, that's for the second podcast. We'll dive into that. All right. So, Oz, here's some rapid fire questions I would love to ask you. And again, these are kind of just first thought, best thought, and then we'll wrap up. Give you a quick little chance to plug anything you want, and then we'll wrap. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So, first question: what is the last album that blew your mind?
uh Blew my mind. You laugh at me, but I really love the last Sabrina Carpenter album. It didn't
Really?
blow my mind, but I really like it. I like pop music, good pop music. I love that band Lake Street Dive. Lake Street Dive. They're great. I saw them in the Garden. They're fantastic. It didn't blow my mind, but it's really
It's
good.
fun.
Yeah,
It's
it's
very
fun.
fun.
Yeah, I like simple shit.
I saw Lake Street Dive probably about 10 years ago in a music festival where they played inside of a barn. And I don't think anybody really knew who they were yet. And they did Rich Girl by Hall & Oates and just destroyed it. It was so good. And it's on YouTube. It's like got millions of views on YouTube. It's wonderful. Who is a guitar player that deserves more attention?
Who's a guitar player that deserves more attention? Um, Card. I don't know if he deserves more attention because he's got so much creds, but I think one of the greatest guitar players ever lived is Adam Rogers.
Okay. I don't think I know who that is.
There you go. Just Google him, you'll see. He's on Gazillion Records. He's one of the top guys here in New York, and he can pretty much do almost anything. But it's not that he didn't get the creds. It's just like he's got some solo albums. He's been a sideman as well. He plays with Steely Dan now.
Oh man, that's
So
not a bad gig right
yeah,
there.
so he's a guy that's been around forever, but I think Wayne Krantz is a guy that is super, super important. Um, I guess he could have gotten some more creds, you know.
Are there from those two guitar players, are there any specific songs we should check out from them?
No, just any of their records. They have a bunch of records.
If you lost all of your gear in a tragic house fire and had to start over with only $1,000, what would you get?
$1,000. I would get $1,000, like amp and guitar, or a guitar.
Whatever you want.
Oh,
I'm the insurance adjuster and I hand you $1,000. What are you doing?
I would have to get a Strat first of some sort. I guess a Strat and a Fender amp. You know, Yeah.
What is a concert you attended that surprised you?
Oh, hard for me. What did I saw lately? Uh, that surprised me. I can't think of anything. I recently saw Tedeschi Trucks, but it didn't surprise me. It was just really
Yeah, that's
great.
a that's a great band,
Yeah, it's like
regardless.
I see a lot of live music actually. What surprised me? I can't think about it now. What did I saw before Tedeschi Trucks? Oh, you know what surprised me? I'm not a Fish fan at all. I never listened to the records. Not quite my thing. But somebody invited me to the garden, and I went to see it, and I was amazed by the community. Everybody was standing. It was full. Everybody was standing, dancing, singing, throwing balloons. That shocked me. I couldn't believe how they were able to get people together in such a way. That was pretty amazing to me to see. You know,
Hmm. How do you recover from a bad gig?
you just go to sleep.
After a few drinks, or just
I
straight to
don't
bed,
drink.
or
Unfortunately, I don't drink, so I don't have any way to, uh, get my misery out of the. I just deal with it, and I go to sleep, and then tomorrow is another day.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
What took you from a beginner musician to an intermediate musician?
Started to play with people. That's what makes the difference. When you're able to start interacting with other musicians, then that's where you kind of get to the next level.
And then what took you from an intermediate musician to an advanced musician?
Playing with better players than I am. That's what makes you kind of elevates you, you know.
And then who is a guitar player you look up to?
Oh, who do I not look up to? Oh my God. The one that I like, I really love Pep Metheny. I really like John Scofield, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Bill Frisell, Jeff Beck, Eric Johnson, everybody. I don't know. I love everybody. Everybody that plays good, I love. Like literally, I don't care what it is. I just like it.
Do you ever find it hard to keep listening to guitar music, or is the guitar just like like, do you still listen to guitar music primarily?
I would say that I listen to guitar music more than I listen to piano music or something like that, or saxophone music. But I like to listen to whatever is happening at the moment, kind of thing. Maybe it relates more to guitar, I think. Also, because stylistically, for example, maybe I would like to listen to more blues at some point, or like. But I love pop music and I love songwriting. So I just like to find really good songs that are produced really well. It's got nothing to do with my day-to-day guitar superstardom. You know what I mean? It just got to do with my love for songwriting or songs, because I grew up listening to the Beatles. So to me, good songs are magical. You know what I mean? Are magic. So that's like something I always look into since I'm a kid. Really, you know.
Okay. And last question, Oz, what do people get wrong about being a musician?
Oh, everything.
Anything more specific than that?
Yeah. They think, oh, yeah, but you can make money in music. It's not true. You can make money. You can live a pretty good life. Some people make really good money in music. Um, the thing that they make the most wrong about is the thing that has to do with traveling, with touring. They think it's very luxurious, and it's really not. And the other thing that people don't understand is it's being a musician is a very physical thing, because playing any instrument is physical. Anything that you do every day in a certain kind of way that's not natural is physical. And you can see, people in their later age start to have physical problems, because if you're a drummer and you do this the whole life, eventually you start to mess up your, hands or stuff like that. Same with guitar. Any instrument there's those it's challenging physically. So that's one thing. The other thing that's challenging physically is touring. Traveling is just the way you travel as a musician is just challenging physically. So that's something that people don't quite understand, because you see you on stage, you think, oh yeah, that's easy. They don't understand that you're maybe on a bus or on a plane and you're super jet lagged. You had to fly 12 hours to Japan or something and go and play, or like you had a long recording session, then you had to do it. It's like you have to have a lot of stamina that other people don't have. Like you have to function with very little sleep sometimes. You have to function without eating what you used to eat sometimes, and you have to just still deliver what you deliver, you know?
How do you build that stamina?
It's just over time. It's just experience, you know? And some people can't handle it. That's why some people stop touring, or some people stop being musicians, you know? Because that part is hard, you know? And there's also a mental thing with money, where as a musician, you don't always know when the money is going to come from the next month. And you have to just be fine with it and be smart about it. But it's one of those things where, you know, if you can't handle that, then you go and do something else, you know?
Well, Oz, thank you so much for coming to the Rhinestone podcast, man. I really appreciated you being here. I've had a ton of fun. I really love. I listened to a bunch of interviews with you, and one of the things I'm really happy about is I feel like we got to go to some new avenues that I feel like I haven't really heard you talk about, which was awesome. So, Oz, the floor is yours. Please feel free to plug anything you got coming up, any shows, recordings, any merch, whatever you got coming up. Please, the floor is yours.
I don't know, but like I opened a online store with masterclasses that I basically sell. So it's about 11 masterclasses where you're pretty much showing everything I know. And then there's also a book of my music. So just kind of follow the store if you need to get some masterclasses. I think they're really useful. There's a bunch of instructional books that I released through this company, Fundamental Changes. Those are really good, I think. So that's stuff that you should check out. Come to the shows whenever I'm playing live. Please come, because that's how we keep it going, you know? I got some stuff coming up in Asia, you know, but those things, just follow me on social media. Then you'll know I play all the time. I do stuff all the time. So just, you know, keep up with what I'm doing, you know? And come see me play when I'm in a city near you or something. And most important, it's hard to say buy the records because nobody freaking buys records anymore. But at least if somebody released an album, it's not only me, it's everybody. It costs money to do that stuff. So just purchase it or listen to it, or any way that can give something back to the artist, because it's very challenging to make music now in this environment, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, Oz, again, thank you so much for coming on the Rhinestone podcast. I definitely would love to do a round two with you at some point in the near future. And I had a really great time. Thank you for being here. And until next time.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.